The conference room on the 32nd floor of Aegis Technologies was dead silent. The early spring chill of Chicago pressed hard against the floor-to-ceiling glass, but the tension inside was far more suffocating. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my hands clasped loosely over a blank legal pad. At the head of the table stood Vanessa. She was my wife of 7 years, and the CEO of the company we had built from a crumbling garage in Austin into a tech giant. The board has reviewed the final allocations for the Q4 performance bonuses, Vanessa said, her voice cool and carrying the sharp, practiced cadence of a seasoned executive. She adjusted her designer glasses, not once looking down the table at me. Regarding the $8 million bonus originally earmarked for the chief of operations, the board has decided to reallocate these funds. Effective immediately, this sum will be transferred to Marcus Thorne's compensation package, designated for executive housing procurement. Marcus, sitting directly to her left, offered a polite, practiced smile. He was 26, wore a bespoke Italian suit that probably cost more than my first car, and had been hired as Vanessa's special assistant 6 months ago. Marcus has shown exceptional dedication to our expansion strategy, Vanessa continued, finally shifting her gaze to me. Her eyes were empty, devoid of any warmth we had shared over nearly a decade. Ryan, as a co-founder and major shareholder, do you have any objections? The silence stretched for 5 excruciating seconds. The other 6 board members suddenly found their tablets and phones incredibly fascinating. No one looked at me. Nobody wanted to lock eyes with the man who had spent the last 3 years flying to 11 different cities a month, running on black coffee and adrenaline to secure the $200 million government contract that put Aegis on the map. I stared at Vanessa. Then I looked at Marcus, who raised his chin just a fraction of an inch. A silent, arrogant declaration of victory. No objections, I said. I pulled the document toward me, picked up the silver Mont Blanc pen Vanessa had bought me for our 5th anniversary, and signed my name on the dotted line. Ryan Fletcher. Vanessa looked momentarily taken aback by how easily I had surrendered. She cleared her throat, quickly regaining her composure. Good. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Marcus, if you would present the Q1 marketing projections. As Marcus began to speak, his voice smooth and dripping with Ivy League pretension, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out under the table. It was a bank notification. Deposit, $3,000. My monthly base salary. They had stripped me of my executive allowances, routed my project commissions elsewhere, and left me with the bare minimum required by my outdated employment contract. I looked up. Vanessa was leaning close to Marcus, whispering something in his ear. Marcus nodded, a soft, intimate smile playing on his lips. It was a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I opened my phone's encrypted notes app. March 15, 2024. Shareholder meeting. $8 million bonus transferred to Marcus Thorne. I casually raised my phone, framing Vanessa's presentation screen, the signed document on the desk, and Marcus's nameplate in a single, high-definition photograph. Click. Save to the cloud. Ryan? Vanessa's voice cut through my thoughts. Are you paying attention? Every second of it. Vanessa, I said, putting my phone away. Every single second. You signed it. Just like that? Lawrence, our director of finance, caught up to me in the glass corridor right outside the executive suite. He looked around nervously, his balding head sweating despite the central air. The board approved it, Lawrence. There was nothing to argue, I said, keeping my pace steady toward the elevator bank. Ryan, it's not right, Lawrence hissed, stepping into the elevator cab with me and pressing the button for the lobby. That $8 million was yours. You practically lived in hotel rooms for 6 months to close the Vanguard competitor account. And your expense reports? Vanessa flagged them. She refused to sign off on your $12,000 travel reimbursement. On what grounds? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She said your lodging choices were non-compliant with executive standards. You stayed at Holiday Inns, Ryan. You ate diner food to keep our overhead low while we were cash-strapped. Lawrence shook his head, his face flush with genuine anger. Now she's buying Marcus a penthouse in Lincoln Park with your sweat. It's disgusting. I appreciate the concern, Lawrence. Just keep your head down and do your job. Don't get caught in the crossfire. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. I walked out into the crisp Chicago air without looking back. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Come home for dinner. Mom is here. I typed a single word, okay. When I unlocked the door to our $5 million Gold Coast townhouse, a property I had paid for entirely in cash 3 years ago, the scent of roasted rosemary chicken drifted from the kitchen. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, was lounging on the velvet sofa, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. She didn't get up. She just tilted her chin slightly. "You're late, Ryan." "Traffic on the Dan, Ryan," I replied, throwing my keys on the console. "Vanessa told me what happened at the meeting today," Evelyn said, swirling her wine. "I hope you didn't make a scene." Vanessa works incredibly hard to keep Aegis at the top. As her husband, you need to support her decisions, not throw tantrums over money. I signed the paper, Evelyn. No tantrums. Good. Because honestly, Ryan, you've been so obsessed with work lately. You've completely neglected Vanessa. A marriage isn't just about business. If Marcus is taking some of the operational weight off Vanessa's shoulders, you should be thanking him, not begrudging him a little bonus. Vanessa walked out of the kitchen, wearing a casual silk robe. "Mom, that's enough. Let's just eat." Dinner was a miserable, silent affair. Evelyn spent 30 minutes talking about her friends' sons who were buying yachts, and how Vanessa's younger brother, Tyler, needed a leg up. "Speaking of Tyler," Evelyn said, setting her fork down with a sharp clink. "He's getting married next month. The bride's family is demanding a 20% down payment on a place in the suburbs. He's short about $200,000. I kept chewing my chicken. And we expect you to cover it," Evelyn said, as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "You're his brother-in-law. $200,000 is couch change for you." "I don't have it," I said simply. Evelyn's face hardened. "Don't lie to me, Ryan. You're a co-founder of Aegis. I was just stripped of my $8 million bonus today, remember?" I looked at Vanessa. She kept her eyes glued to her plate. "Vanessa, do I have $200,000 to spare right now?" Vanessa cleared her throat. "Ryan, Tyler is family. I'll transfer the money from our joint savings tomorrow." "It's fine." "Of course it is," I murmured, putting my utensils down. "I'm done." "Excuse me." I walked into my study, locked the heavy oak door, and pulled out my phone. I didn't open my bank app. Instead, I scrolled down to a contact I had saved 3 months ago. Victor Vance, CEO of Vanguard Enterprises. Aegis's fiercest rival. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Fletcher," Victor's deep, gravelly voice echoed through the speaker. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I'm ready to talk." "Victor," I said. A pause. "Have you made your decision?" "Yes. Tomorrow afternoon. 3 o'clock. The usual spot." "I'll be there," Victor said. I hung up, opened my voice recorder, and placed the phone on my desk. "My name is Ryan Fletcher. Today is March 15th, 2026. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, and my wife, Vanessa, have demanded I pay $200,000 for Tyler's wedding expenses. Vanessa has agreed to take this from our shared assets without my consent." Recording saved. I uploaded the file to my private server, labeled it 0315, Aegis, extortion, and closed my laptop. The chess pieces were on the board. It was time to play. The dimly lit booth at the back of the gauge was quiet enough for secrets. Victor Vance was already there, nursing a neat bourbon. He was in his late 50s, with sharp gray eyes and a reputation for being an absolute apex predator in the tech industry. I sat down opposite him. The waiter approached, but I waved him off with a quick shake of my head. "Just water, please." "You look tired, Ryan," Victor said, studying my face as he swirled his glass. "I am tired, Victor, which is why I'm going to make this quick." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. "I have what you want." Victor raised an eyebrow, a slow grin spreading across his face. "The Aegis core algorithm?" "Better. I have the entire 3-year strategic expansion map. The complete client acquisition database, including our federal defense contacts. And most importantly, I have the master key to Aegis's proprietary financial routing system." Victor's hand paused on his glass. The smug corporate diplomat was gone, replaced by the shark sensing blood in the water. "That system is heavily encrypted. Even our best software engineers couldn't crack the firewall. I built that firewall, Victor. I left myself a back door when we incorporated. It was meant to be a safety measure in case of a hostile takeover. I never thought I'd have to use it against my own wife." I pulled an encrypted flash drive from my jacket pocket and pushed it across the table. "But here we are." Victor didn't touch the drive immediately. He just stared at it, calculating. "What are your terms, Ryan?" "First, Complete confidentiality. My name cannot be associated with Vanguard until the dust settles. Second, $5 million cash, paid up front as a signing bonus to an offshore account I've set up. Third, I want the Executive Vice President of Operations position at Vanguard. A base salary of $1.2 million, plus 3% equity. Victor chuckled, a low, appreciative sound. You're asking for a lot, Fletcher. You're basically asking me to hand you the keys to my kingdom. I am giving you the tools to destroy your biggest competitor overnight, I replied, keeping my voice dead even. With this data, you can underbid Aegis on every major contract in the pipeline. Within 48 hours, their valuation will plunge. Within a week, they'll be facing a liquidity crisis. Victor stared at me for a long time, measuring the weight of my resolve. Slowly, he reached out, picked up the flash drive, and slipped it into his breast pocket. The contract will be delivered to your private address by courier tomorrow morning. The $5 million will be wired to your Cayman account the moment the signatures are verified. Victor extended his hand. Welcome to Vanguard, Ryan. Good to be here, I said, shaking his hand. As I walked out of the restaurant, my phone screen lit up. A notification from Vanessa. Company dinner tonight at Prime Provisions. Be there by 7. Don't embarrass me. I deleted the message, walked to my car, and drove toward the Lion's Den. The private dining room at Prime Provisions was loud, filled with the clinking of crystal and the self-congratulatory laughter of 20 Aegis executives. Vanessa sat at the center of the long table, looking every bit the queen of her empire. Marcus was right beside her, whispering something that made her laugh. A genuine, unforced laugh she hadn't given me in years. I walked in quietly and slipped into an empty chair near the end of the table, next to some junior developers who quickly looked down at their plates. Ah, Ryan. Glad you could make it. Marcus called out loudly, raising his glass. The entire room fell silent, turning their heads toward me. We were just celebrating our record-breaking quarter. I wanted to propose a toast to the man who laid the groundwork for our logistics. It was a classic corporate backhand, and everyone in the room knew it. Laid the groundwork meant I was the past, and Marcus was the future. I don't drink, Marcus, I said, keeping my hands flat on the table. Oh, come on, Ryan, Marcus sneered softly, stepping up from his seat and walking down the table with a bottle of Dom Perignon. He poured a generous glass and pushed it in front of me. Just one glass. For the team. Or are you still bitter about the board's decision yesterday? A few executives chuckled nervously. Vanessa didn't stop him. She watched me, her eyes daring me to make a scene. Drink it, Ryan, Vanessa said from across the table, her tone dripping with passive aggression. Don't be a party pooper. Marcus is trying to be nice. I looked at the bubbling champagne, then up at Marcus's smug face. I said no. I replied, my voice slicing through the room's tension like a razor. Marcus laughed, waving his hand to the room. Well, I guess some people just don't have the stomach for success. I'll drink it for you. He knocked the glass back, and the table erupted into cheers. I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked out of the restaurant without saying another word. I sat in my car in the darkened parking lot, watching the rain start to smear across the windshield. My phone buzzed. It was a secure email notification from my offshore bank. Incoming wire, $5 million. Sender, Vanguard Enterprises, LLC. A second email arrived. It was the signed employment contract from Victor Vance, countersigned by their legal department. I opened my laptop, connected to my secure VPN, and accessed the Aegis financial server. My back door was still wide open. For years, I had maintained the system's architecture. I knew every line of code, every automated routing protocol. Aegis currently held $7 billion in liquid capital, funds meant for our upcoming global RD expansion, client escrow, and operating reserves. With a few keystrokes, I initiated a series of automated, high-frequency transfers. To the external auditors, it would look like a legitimate corporate investment into a high-yield treasury bond managed by an offshore entity. But the destination account was a shell company owned entirely by Vanguard Enterprises. I watched the progress bar hit 100%. Transfer complete, $7 billion. I closed my laptop. Then, I drafted a single email addressed to Vanessa with the entire board and all major shareholders CC'd. Subject: urgent notification regarding corporate liquidity. Body: please be advised that as of 11:32 p.m. tonight, The $7 billion in Aegis liquid reserves has been fully transferred out of our accounts. Have a great night. I hit send. Immediately, I took my phone, pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and threw it out the window into the Chicago rain. 1 month later, the Cook County Courthouse was packed. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table, looking pale but furious. Her tailored navy suit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. Aegis's stock had plummeted 80% in the last 30 days, and the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Beside her sat her high-priced corporate attorney, while Marcus was in the front row of the gallery, looking visibly shaken. I sat at the defense table next to my attorney, Sterling. The judge banged her gavel. We are here today to hear the motion for an emergency injunction and criminal referral in the matter of Aegis Technologies versus Ryan Fletcher. Plaintiff's counsel, you may proceed. Vanessa's lawyer stood up, adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, the defendant, Ryan Fletcher, maliciously and without board authorization, used an unauthorized technological backdoor to drain $7 billion of Aegis's operational capital, transferring it directly to their chief competitor, Vanguard. We have the digital logs pointing directly to his signature key. This is a clear-cut case of grand larceny and corporate espionage. The judge looked at me, her expression grim. Mr. Sterling, how does your client respond? Sterling stood up, calm and unbothered. Your Honor, my client did indeed transfer those funds. However, he did so under his authority as the co-founder and co-owner of the intellectual property that governs Aegis's financial routing. Furthermore, we submit to the court that my client was acting as a whistleblower to protect those very funds from being illegally embezzled by the plaintiff, Vanessa Fletcher, and her associate, Marcus Thorne. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Vanessa's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is a baseless smear campaign. If I may, Your Honor, Sterling said, presenting a thick manila folder to the bailiff. We have obtained forensic data from Mr. Marcus Thorne's personal mobile device, specifically unencrypted chat logs and contract drafts dating back over the last 6 months. Vanessa turned her head sharply, glaring at Marcus, who looked like he was about to vomit. These records show, Sterling continued, that Mrs. Fletcher and Mr. Thorne were actively drafting sham consulting agreements to funnel millions of dollars of Aegis's capital into private offshore accounts registered in Marcus Thorne's name. The $8 million housing allowance granted to Mr. Thorne last month was merely the first phase of this embezzlement scheme. My client transferred the $7 billion to a secure, neutral escrow account to prevent the total liquidation of the company by these two individuals. The judge reviewed the documents. Her face grew progressively darker. Mrs. Fletcher, did you sign these draft agreements? Your Honor, those were just preliminary discussions. Vanessa stammered, her voice cracking. The digital signatures on these PDFs are verified, Your Honor, Sterling added. Furthermore, we have bank statements showing a $200,000 transfer from Aegis's corporate accounts to a private account owned by Tyler Vance, the plaintiff's brother, disguised as an operational bonus. The judge banged her gavel loudly. Silence in the court. I have seen enough. The motion for an injunction against Ryan Fletcher is denied. Furthermore, I am referring Vanessa Fletcher and Marcus Thorne to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for immediate investigation into corporate fraud and grand larceny. Vanessa sank back into her chair, her face utterly bloodless. She looked across the courtroom at me, her eyes pleading, begging for mercy. I stood up, buttoned my charcoal suit jacket, and walked out of the courtroom without giving her a second glance. 1 year later, the view from my executive office on the top floor of Vanguard's new headquarters was breathtaking, but I barely had time to look at it. My door opened, and Victor Vance walked in without knocking, holding a sleek black tablet. Ryan, the municipal tech contract just came through. We underbid the remaining carcass of Aegis by 40%. It's officially over. Their receivership attorney is filing for Chapter 7 liquidation tomorrow morning. Good, I said, signing off on a set of logistical reports without looking up. It's about time we put them out of their misery. You've done an incredible job here, Ryan. You're the best investment I ever made. Victor patted my shoulder and headed back out. Just as I reached into my desk drawer to grab my car keys, my assistant paged me over the intercom. Mr. Fletcher, there's a man downstairs in the lobby. Security didn't want to let him up. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's an emergency regarding Vanessa. Name? Marcus Thorne. I paused, my hand hovering over my keys. Send him to the coffee shop across the street. I'll meet him there. 10 minutes later, I walked into the bustling Starbucks. Marcus was sitting in a corner booth. The arrogant boy in the bespoke Italian suit was gone. In his place sat a hollow-eyed, gaunt man wearing a faded navy blazer with frayed cuffs. His hands shook as he held a paper cup. I sat down opposite him. You have 3 minutes, Marcus. Ryan, Marcus whispered, his voice trembling as he looked up. Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to turn to. Get to the point. Vanessa is sick. It's gastric cancer. Stage 2. He swallowed hard, tears welling in his eyes. The legal fees from the federal trial took everything she had left. The bank foreclosed on the Gold Coast townhouse. Her mother sold her place to pay for the initial treatments, but were completely tapped out. Tyler took his money and ran to Florida. He won't even take her calls. I watched him quietly, keeping my expression entirely blank. And why are you telling me this? I need a loan, Ryan. $50,000. Just enough to cover her next round of chemotherapy. She's dying in a state hospital ward right now. They don't even have enough staff to watch her. Marcus reached across the table, trying to grab my arm, his grip desperate. I know I was an asshole. I know I took your money and your wife. But please, don't let her die like this. I slowly pulled my arm back, out of his reach. The answer is no, Marcus. His face fell, the last spark of hope dying in his eyes. Ryan, please. She still loves you. She looks at your old photos every day. She loved my money, and she loved the power I gave her. I said, my voice cold and flat. You wanted my life, Marcus. You took it. Now you get to live with the consequences of it. I pulled a sleek leather card holder from my pocket, slid out a business card, and placed it on the table. This is Dr. Harrison. He's the head of oncology at Northwestern. He owes me a favor. I'll call him and ask him to take her case. He'll get her onto a clinical trial that will cover her treatment costs. But I will not give you a single dime. Marcus stared at the card, then looked up at me, his face a mask of shame and gratitude. Thank you, Ryan. I thank you. Don't ever contact me again, I said, standing up and walking out of the shop. The local pub on Dearborn was loud, smelling of stale draft beer and fried food. It was a far cry from the upscale steak houses Vanessa used to drag me to, but it was Lawrence's favorite spot in the city. Lawrence clinked his pint of Guinness against my club soda. I still can't believe you pulled it off, Ryan. The $7 billion. The federal charges. You played them like a cheap fiddle. It wasn't that hard, Lawrence, I said, taking a sip. People get sloppy when they think they've already won. But the transfer itself, Lawrence leaned in, lowering his voice over the pub's chatter. Aegis's security protocols were top tier. How did you bypass the dual authorization requirement without Vanessa's key? Because I wrote the code for that dual authorization system 5 years ago, I said. When we first built the architecture, Vanessa didn't want to pay for external security audits. I set up a master override protocol under the guise of an emergency system recovery tool. It was meant to protect us if our servers were ever held hostage by ransomware. I just repurposed it. Lawrence shook his head, a mix of awe and fear in his eyes. And Marcus's phone? How did you get your hands on his private chats? Marcus is an idiot, I said flatly. We were at a company dinner last year to celebrate the security contract. He went to the restroom and left his phone face up on the table. It didn't even have a passcode. I grabbed it, opened his messaging app, and forwarded the entire chat thread with Vanessa to an encrypted burner email in under 30 seconds. They were literally planning how to push me out and split my equity while sitting in the same room as me. And you just sat on that information for months? Anger makes you sloppy, Lawrence. I needed to wait until the exact moment they executed their plan. If I had exposed them earlier, Vanessa would have just fired Marcus, hired a crisis PR firm, and kept my shares. I had to let them think they were succeeding so they'd walk right into the trap. Lawrence stared into his beer glass, quiet for a moment. You're a cold bastard, Ryan. You know that. I was a loyal partner and a husband for 7 years, Lawrence. They made me a cold bastard. I set my glass down. Come on, let me get the tab. The next morning, the energy inside the New York Stock Exchange was electric. The trading floor was a sea of blue jackets, ringing phones, and flashing digital displays. Today was the day Vanguard Enterprises went public. Victor Vance stood beside me on the balcony overlooking the floor, a massive grin on his face. He checked his gold watch, then clapped me on the back. 10 seconds, Ryan. You ready to ring the bell? Always, I said. The digital clock on the wall counted down. 3, 2, 1. I slammed the green button. The historic brass bell echoed through the massive hall, drowned out almost instantly by a deafening roar of cheers and applause from the traders below. The giant screens outside in Times Square instantly updated, displaying our new ticker symbol, VNGD. Opening at 45 a share, Victor shouted over the noise, pointing at the ticker. We're already up 12% in pre-market trading. We did it, Ryan. Traders were high-fiving, and cameras flashed from every angle. I shook hands with the board members, smiling for the press, playing the part of the victorious tech tycoon. But inside, I felt a strange sense of calm. The noise, the lights, the money, it was exactly what Vanessa had spent her entire life chasing. Now that I had it, I realized it was just a byproduct of survival. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a restricted number. I stepped away from the celebrating crowd, slipping into a quiet, carpeted corridor near the executive offices. I answered, Ryan Fletcher. Ryan. The voice on the other end was weak, raspy, and interrupted by a shallow, painful cough. It was Vanessa. I leaned against the wood-paneled wall, looking down at my polished shoes. Vanessa. I saw the news, she whispered. The TV in the ward has the market report on. You look good in a suit. You always did. Thank you. Marcus told me what you did, she continued, her voice trembling. About Dr. Harrison. The clinical trial. They moved me to a private room this morning. The doctors say the prognosis is actually decent if the therapy takes. Dr. Harrison is the best in the Midwest. You're in good hands. Why did you do it, Ryan? She sobbed, the sound muffled by the static of the line. After everything I did to you, why save my life? Because I wanted to prove a point, Vanessa, I said, my voice dead even, devoid of any anger. I wanted you to know that even at your worst, you couldn't turn me into you. I don't kick people when they're down, not even the ones who deserve it. There was a long silence on the line, save for the faint beep of a heart monitor in the background. I'm so sorry, Ryan, she whispered, her voice cracking completely. I threw away the only real thing I ever had for a handful of ash. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I said quietly. Goodbye, Vanessa. I hung up before she could reply. I unlocked my phone, opened my secure cloud storage, and located the folder labeled Aegis Evidence. Inside were 47 files, the recordings of Evelyn's demands, the screenshots of Marcus's chats, the financial records of their betrayal, and the photos of the old shareholder meeting. I pressed down on the folder, hit the trash icon, and clicked permanently delete. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. I tapped yes. I walked back out onto the balcony. The sun was streaming through the massive glass skylights of the exchange, casting a warm, brilliant light over the trading floor. Victor was waving me over for a group photo. I took a deep breath, adjusted my cuffs, and walked back into the light.